In the vibrant village of Quintana, where life revolved around agriculture and trade, there lived a humble blacksmith named Kwame. Kwame was renowned not only for his craftsmanship at the forge, but also for his generous spirit. As a widower, he had devoted his life to raising his two children, Abina, a lively 14-year-old with aspirations of becoming a teacher, and Kofi, a curious 10-year-old who loved creating gadgets from discarded materials. Kwame's forge was the heart of the village. By day, it resonated with the rhythmic sound of his hammer striking metal. By night, it transformed into a gathering place where villagers exchanged stories and sought his wisdom. Despite his modest income, Kwame ensured his children felt the richness of love and guidance. "Papa," Abina asked one evening as they sat by the fire, "why do you work so hard for us? Don't you wish for an easier life?" Kwame smiled, his face illuminated by the flickering flames. "Abina, love is like this fire. It provides warmth and light to others, even as the wood burns away. My happiness comes from watching you and Kofi grow into who you are meant to be." Despite his unwavering optimism, life in Quintana was challenging. The previous harvest had been poor, leaving many villagers struggling. Kwame's forge barely generated enough to keep his family afloat. One afternoon, Abina returned from school clutching a crumpled piece of paper. Her face was pale. "Papa," she whispered, her voice shaky. "The fees for the new term, they're too high. I don't think I can go back." Kwame took the paper and examined it silently. The amount was daunting, far beyond what he could manage with his current earnings. Yet, as he looked into Abina's tear-filled eyes, he made a silent vow. She would not miss out on her education. After putting the children to bed that night, Kwame sat in his workshop. The forge glowed softly, casting flickering shadows on the walls. It was his sanctuary, the place where he shaped metal into tools and his thoughts into decisions. Staring at his cherished forge hammer, a family heirloom passed down through generations, he wondered if it might hold the key to solving their dilemma. The weight of the decision pressed on him, like the anvil beneath his tools. Selling the hammer would mean losing a piece of his family's legacy, but it might also secure Abina's future. As the village slept, Kwame's heart wrestled with the choice ahead. The next morning, Kwame opened his workshop early, determined to find a way to earn the necessary money. As he fired up the forge, a farmer named Kojo arrived with a broken plow in his hands. "Kwame," Kojo said, desperation in his voice, "I need this plow fixed before the rains come, but I can only pay you half the usual fee." Kwame examined the plow, noting the cracked blade and splintered handle. The repair would take hours, and the reduced fee wouldn't bring him much closer to Abina's school fees. Yet, as he glanced at Kojo's calloused hands and weary expression, he saw a man in need, just like himself. "Bring it here," Kwame said, taking the plow from him. As Kwame worked, Kofi appeared in the doorway. "Papa," he said, watching his father hammer away at the metal, "why do you always help people even when we need help too?" Kwame paused, wiping the sweat from his brow. "Because, Kofi, love isn't just for those close to us. It's for anyone who needs it. When we give, we create space for blessings to return to us." Kofi tilted his head, trying to understand his father's words. "So, you think the universe will help us because you're helping Mr. Kojo?" Kwame chuckled. "Maybe not today, but one day. Kindness always finds its way back home." That evening, after delivering the repaired plow, Kwame sat with his children, sharing a small bowl of soup that was their only meal for the night. Abina noticed her father's weary face. "Papa, why don't you let me stay home? I can help you with the forge." Kwame shook his head firmly. "Abina, your education is the key to a better life. I'll handle everything. You just focus on your dreams." Despite his brave words, Kwame knew he was running out of time and options. The deadline for the fees loomed, and the small jobs at the forge barely made a dent in the amount needed. As he gazed at the forge hammer that night, the weight of his decision finally lifted. It was time to sacrifice the heirloom. The next morning, Kwame rose before dawn, his heart heavy as he wrapped the forge hammer in a cloth, feeling its familiar weight in his hands. This hammer had belonged to his father and grandfather before him, a symbol of their family's craftsmanship and perseverance. But today, it was no longer just a tool. It represented his only hope for Abina's future. Abina and Kofi were still asleep when Kwame made his way to the home of Kojo Edu, the wealthiest merchant in Quintana. Kojo was known for his collection of antiques and heirlooms, a man who recognized the value in things that others often overlooked. Kwame, Kojo greeted him warmly. "What brings you here so early?" Kwame hesitated before unwrapping the hammer. Its polished handle gleamed in the morning light, and the etched markings on the metal told stories of decades of hard work. "Kojo, I've come to sell this. It's a family heirloom, but I need the money for Abina's school fees." Kojo's eyes widened as he examined the hammer. "This is exquisite craftsmanship, Kwame. Are you sure you want to part with it?" Kwame nodded, his throat tight. "My children's future means more to me than any legacy." Kojo offered a price that was generous, but it stung Kwame to accept. As he handed over the hammer, he felt as if he were surrendering a piece of his identity. Yet, as he walked home with the coins jingling in his pocket, he reminded himself of the reason behind the sacrifice. When Abina returned from school that afternoon, Kwame handed her the money. Her eyes widened in shock. "Papa, where did you get this?" Kwame smiled and gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her face. "I did what any father would do, Abina. Your dreams are worth more than anything I own." Abina threw her arms around him, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, Papa. I promise I'll make you proud." That evening, Kwame sat by the fire with Kofi, who had been quietly observing everything. "Papa," Kofi asked, "was it hard to give up the hammer?" Kwame nodded, his gaze distant. "Yes, Kofi, but sometimes love asks us to let go of what we treasure most. And when we do, we often find something even greater in return." Little did Kwame know, his sacrifice would inspire an unexpected chain of events. The news of Kwame's sacrifice quickly spread through Quintana. Villagers admired his dedication to his children, and some even offered small tokens of support. However, it was an encounter with a stranger that would change everything. One day, as Kwame worked at his forge, a traveling trader named Amma arrived with a cart full of wares. Amma was an elderly woman with kind eyes and a deep appreciation for craftsmanship. She had heard about Kwame's hammer and the sacrifice he had made. "I've traveled far and wide," Amma said, "and I've seen many treasures, but none as priceless as a father's love. Tell me, Kwame, what drives you to give so selflessly?" Kwame paused, wiping his hands on his apron. "It's simple, Amma. My children are my legacy. If I can give them a future, then my life has been well spent." Amma smiled and reached into her cart, pulling out a beautifully engraved metal plaque. "This is for you," she said. "It's a token of appreciation for your devotion. And if you ever need help, remember that kindness has a way of returning to those who give it." Kwame thanked Amma and hung the plaque in his workshop. Its inscription read, "Love is the fire that forges greatness." Weeks passed, and Kwame continued to work tirelessly, though he missed the familiar weight of his hammer. Abina excelled in school, and Kofi spent his days inventing clever tools to help around the house. The family grew closer, their bond strengthened by Kwame's example of sacrifice. But as the harvest season approached, a new challenge loomed on the horizon, one that would test Kwame's resolve once again. The harvest season brought a renewed sense of hope to Quintana. The fields turned golden under the sun, and the villagers worked tirelessly to gather their crops. Yet for Kwame, the season came with unforeseen challenges. One fateful afternoon, dark clouds rolled in, casting an ominous shadow over the village. A storm swept through, its ferocity tearing off rooftops and flattening crops. Among those affected was Kojo, the farmer Kwame had helped earlier. The storm had destroyed his barn and scattered his harvest, leaving his family in despair. Kojo arrived at Kwame's forge, his eyes red with worry. "Kwame," he pleaded, "I know I have little to give, but I need your help. My tools are broken, and I can't rebuild without them." Kwame looked at the worn tools Kojo placed before him. They were beyond repair, but the alternative would be to build entirely new ones, an expense Kwame couldn't afford. His own savings were nearly depleted after paying Abina's school fees. Kofi, who had been quietly tinkering in the corner, overheard the conversation. "Papa," he said, walking over with one of his homemade gadgets, "maybe I can help." Kwame studied Kofi's creation. It was a crude but clever contraption made of scrap metal, designed to cut and bind straw. "Kofi," Kwame said, a hint of pride in his voice, "this could work. Let's give it a try." Father and son worked late into the night, combining their skills to create a tool that would not only aid Kojo but also teach Kofi the value of ingenuity and teamwork. When they presented it to Kojo the next morning, his gratitude was overwhelming. "Kwame," Kojo said, tears in his eyes, "I don't know how to thank you. Your kindness has saved my family." Kwame placed a hand on his shoulder. "We're all in this together, Kojo. Helping each other is how we survive." Word of Kwame's generosity spread once more, and this time it reached the ears of an unexpected visitor, Alma, the traveling trader. Alma returned to Quintana weeks later, intrigued by the stories of Kwame's continued sacrifices. She arrived at the forge just as Kwame was finishing a set of tools for another farmer. "Kwame," Alma said with a warm smile, "it seems your forge doesn't just shape metal. It shapes lives." Kwame laughed, though his exhaustion was evident. "I do what I can, Alma, but it's not always easy." Alma's gaze fell on Kofi, who was proudly demonstrating his latest invention to Abina. "You've taught your children well," Alma said. "Your sacrifices have planted seeds of love and resilience in their hearts. That is a legacy no storm can destroy." Reaching into her cart, Alma pulled out a small chest and handed it to Kwame. "Open it," she said. Kwame hesitated, then lifted the lid. Inside were coins, far more than what he had received for the hammer, along with a letter. The letter read, "To Kwame, the blacksmith whose heart shines brighter than gold. Your acts of love have inspired not only your village, but also a stranger like me. This gift is not charity. It is a recognition of your worth. Use it to rebuild your forge, support your children, and continue spreading kindness." Kwame's hands trembled as he read the words. He looked up at Alma, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. "You already have," Alma replied. "Your story reminds us that love and sacrifice are the golden threads that bind us all." With the money, Kwame repaired his forge and invested in Kofi's inventions, turning them into tools that helped the entire village. Abina excelled in school, eventually becoming a teacher who inspired others to dream big. Years later, when Kwame's hair had turned gray and his children were grown, the forge still stood, not just as a place of work, but as a beacon of hope. Villagers would gather there, sharing stories of how one man's sacrifices had woven a legacy of love and unity. And so, the tale of Kwame, the blacksmith who taught love through sacrifice, became a cherished story in Quintana, passed down to remind everyone that the greatest wealth lies in what we give to others. Moral lessons. 1. Love is the greatest legacy. True wealth comes from the sacrifices we make for those we care about. 2. Kindness creates ripples. A single act of generosity can inspire and uplift an entire community. 3. Teamwork and resilience lead to solutions. Together, we can overcome even the most daunting challenges. 4. Invest in the future. Supporting the dreams of the next generation ensures a brighter tomorrow. Sometimes, the most profound expressions of love come with sacrifice. While it may be difficult to part with something precious, remember that the seeds you sow through kindness and selflessness will blossom into something far more beautiful and enduring. Your actions today can shape the legacy you leave behind. So choose to invest in love, compassion, and the well-being of those around you. If you feel that your acts of kindness go unnoticed or unappreciated, remember that the true impact of love often lies beyond what we can see. Every selfless deed you perform contributes to a brighter world and touches lives in ways you may never fully comprehend. So take heart and continue to do good, because your efforts truly matter. As you reflect on this story, consider these questions. What is something you cherish that you would be willing to sacrifice for the happiness or success of someone you love? Have you ever witnessed or experienced an act of selflessness that left a lasting impression on you? How can you, in your own way, create a ripple of kindness in your community or family today? Life often tests us in ways that seem overwhelming, but never underestimate the power of love and determination. Like Kwame, you have the ability to create change, inspire others, and leave a legacy that will be remembered for generations. Every small act of love, every choice to give, and every effort to support someone's dream makes the world a brighter place. So keep shining, keep giving, and know that your sacrifices are never in vain. If this story inspired you, share it with someone you care about to spread the message of love and sacrifice far and wide. We'd love to hear your story. So tell us in the comments one way you've experienced or shown love through sacrifice. And don't forget to subscribe to Davi's Golden Tales for more heartwarming stories and life lessons that inspire.